we're in 1 Timothy 6 still, but we're ready for verse 20. This is an intriguing verse to me. Timothy, guard what has been entrusted to your care. Now that's interesting. What does it mean to, well, first of all, what has been entrusted to his care? Well, I look at it and think, as a pastor, as the lead minister in Ephesus, he had a flock that had been entrusted to him. I don't know the size of it, but I do know in the time, as Paul writes to Timothy, that church was pretty vibrant. It had issues because it was populated by humans, but Timothy had been entrusted with the care of this flock. Every leader has been entrusted with the care of the people that they lead. And sometimes a good leader seems to instinctively know this, or else has been mentored well into understanding it. Bad leaders seem to not know this, that their leadership, their status, I think in their mind, has to do with their own ego and their own power. And I mean, that's the dark side. The other side, the more valuable side, is if you're a leader, you've been entrusted with the care of those people. Now, a lot of people who are listening to this, maybe even most, probably don't feel like they're much of a leader. They're not in a position of authorized leadership. Most all of us lead somebody. I think it was E.V. Hill that I first heard it from. He said, a leader is one who people follow. Duh. If people aren't following you, you're just taking a walk. Well, somebody's probably following you. Somebody is observing the way you live your life. And on that level, you're leading someone. Now, there's a second way a second kind of way that Timothy had been entrusted, which I think all of us have been entrusted, and that is we've been entrusted with God's grace. We've been entrusted with the message of truth, the gospel, the good news. How do you guard that? Well, I think, actually, Paul goes on to talk about how you guard that. In the next sentence in that verse says, turn away from godless chatter and the opposing ideas of what is falsely called knowledge. Well, I think what bottom line on that is, you guard the truth that you've been entrusted with, that's been put within your care, by rejecting, turning away from what's not true. Oh my goodness. If you wanted to make a catalog of all the things our culture promotes that is not true, you're going to need about a ream of paper. I know I'm an old guy and I'm cranky most of the time, but here's the deal. Our culture is founded on one central idea, in my opinion, it's untrue. The prime objective of life, says our culture, is to be happy. And your job in life is to figure out what makes you happy and get it. I don't think happiness is an evil. Happiness is good. But happiness is a secondary outcome. Uh, Paul wrote earlier that God's given us everything for our enjoyment. Enjoyment involves happiness. So it's not like God is saying, hey, get that smile off your face. Now, some people have been raised under a theological climate teaching that says if you're happy, something's wrong. Get that smile off your face. I mean, well, okay. We know that's not God's intention. His intention is to provide us with everything for our enjoyment. But enjoyment is not his primary objective. I believe that my enjoyment, my happiness is a secondary outcome. It happens in my life. It happens as I pursue truth and holiness. Now, you can't get around this, folks. Much as I wish we could explain it away sometimes, that Jesus said, be perfect as your Father is perfect. The gospel writers, or Paul and Peter and John kind of indicate, be perfect. God's perfect. Reflect his perfection. Here's what my experience tells me. You can't, because you're not. And perfect is not relative. It's absolute. Well, okay. My goal, my desire, my primary objective is to respond in gratitude to the grace of God. Are there rules to keep? Yeah, there are. It's not all about keeping rules, though. As I understand life that is really life, it involves and can be summarized by my pursuit of gratitude toward God for his grace in my life. Yes, there are rules, there are boundaries. I observe those rules and those boundaries not so that I can get his grace, but because he has given me his grace. I talk about this all the time. But if you get those things turned around, you're in trouble. But the world says it's only about happiness. If a rule doesn't make you happy, then it becomes unnecessary and obsolete, irrelevant. Well, look around. How's that working? Not great. There are other core values in our culture that are just simply false. It's kind of, in my mind, these things fit in the category of godless chatter and the opposing ideas of what is falsely called knowledge. I don't want to just throw rocks at academia because they're academic, because there are some genuinely committed followers of Jesus in academia. God has people everywhere. He really does. But I have to, it's legitimate for me to say not all of academia is in any kind of pursuit of truth. Okay, since I'm on my soapbox, I'm just going to go ahead and say in my mind, the taproot for the silliness, and it's worse than silly, the error of our culture is that we have forsaken the idea of truth. There's no such thing as absolute truth. Truth changes from one situation to another. It doesn't, though. Truth, it either the idea is true or it's not. The culture changes, the world changes, technology changes, our understanding of these things change, but the truth doesn't change. There is no such thing as your truth and my truth, and I've been on a rant about that before. But if of all the godless chatter and opposing ideas, that, I think, has done more destructive things in our world, the world I live in, than any other thing. And out of that comes all kinds of, it's almost like Pandora's box. There are lots of other errors, untruths, godless chatter, and opposing ideas that come out of that. One of the things, I think one of the reasons why Paul says to Timothy, turn away from godless chatter and opposing ideas, is because the folks who promote these opposing ideas and this godless chatter, if you're not careful, you'll begin to think, maybe they're right. Maybe that makes sense. I have seen this happen. And it's an appeal to our ego. I want to be thought of as brilliant in this circle, and those who oppose these ideas are considered not brilliant. So, turn away. Guard what has been entrusted to you, because we have an enemy that wants to steal and kill and destroy. And one of the things he wants to steal out of our hearts is the truth. Fundamental truth is, you're not God. I'm not God. Well, Satan wants to steal that truth. He did with Eve. Oh, he just doesn't want you to be. If you eat this fruit, you'll be like God. Guard it. Guard the truth. Turn away from godless chatter and ideas, the opposing ideas of what is falsely called knowledge. Well, I can go a lot longer, but I'm not going to. I'm going to shut her down early today, and look for you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.